What is social media? Really, think about it. When we dissect the word, we get social, as in relating to society, and media, the plural form of medium. So essentially, social media platforms should be a means or a medium for us to interact with society. And all of you here use social media, so I'd like to ask you, why is social media perceived as the epitome of asocial, unproductive time waste? Well, initially, I thought it was because we were using it incorrectly. And don't get me wrong, that does play into it a lot. I mean, we have masses of children growing up in a world where their parents had never even seen social media. Governments unprepared for this rapid change. Heck, my dad had never even seen a computer up until he'd finished college. Our internet world has problems, but the deeper I delved, the more I wondered, is society ready for social media, or is social media ready for society? When I stepped back to take a look, I realized that it wasn't us. It wasn't parents, it wasn't teachers, it wasn't governments that were failing. Social media was essentially priming us for failure and toxicity. I thought we were using it incorrectly because we weren't playing around its bad design, but when nearly every single platform, including Google search itself, has some kind of echo chamber or filter bubble or other form of algorithmic bias to fight against you and your search for the truth, can you really be put to blame? So that's why I've come before you all here today, not to look at what is going wrong. Fortunately, many people have already outlined that for me before. I wanted to see why it was going wrong. And my conclusion? Social media isn't focused. Either it lacks focus in certain areas, or even worse, it misdirects it entirely, leading to an even worse outcome. I think it all starts with social media's misdirected focus on the individual instead of society as a whole. To be more specific, social media tries to entertain you instead of trying to connect you with society. As a byproduct of this misdirected focus, you're going to be driven into drama, hatred, and general controversy because the algorithm is striving to keep you engaged and on the platform for as long as possible. But here's the thing, this approach is purely asocial and is of absolutely no use to society. Social media essentially forgets the social part entirely in an effort to keep you on the platform for as long as possible. It loses focus of its real goal. Focus needs to be shifted away from the individual and more towards the whole. Stop thinking like one user, think like multiple. I believe that this framework of thinking was the primary idea that drove social media development. Indeed, most products are designed this way, focusing on only one person, one individual. But the social world does not work this way. You can't take social life and turn it into a one-way exchange focused on only one person without severe repercussions. To shift focus away from the individual and more towards the whole, designers at social media platforms and executives at social media platforms need to start considering social media's duty as a part of our social world, which right now is just not happening. The new goal of connecting instead of entertaining will help alleviate the digital world's greatest problems. Platforms like YouTube are introducing features like NewTube that shake up what the algorithm usually recommends to you. And platforms like Twitter have started open sourcing vital parts of their platform, like the algorithm, which should help drive forward change and deliver content to you that challenges your critical beliefs and inspires critical thinking. But then there's also another issue, also related to focus. Social media lacks separation of concerns. It tries to devour almost all exchanges that happen on the internet, attempting to engorge almost all internet life. But the physical world does not work this way. In the physical world, there is a physical separation of concerns. A shop is for shopping, a library is for research, a swimming pool is for swimming. These social spaces are focused. They do one thing and do it well. I'm a bit of a programming nerd, and there was this very popular philosophy adopted by AT&T when they were developing their operating system, Unix. And it was to do one thing and do it well. You can see this throughout almost all of their tools. There is one tool for one job, and this usually creates the best possible version of a tool. Social media does exactly the opposite. Whether it's on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook, The possibilities for discussion are virtually limitless, with varying degrees of formality or informality to navigate depending on the topic at hand. Social media doesn't do one thing really well, it does a lot of things and does them poorly. I believe it is due to this that we get desensitization. Think about all the kinds of content that you might find on your feed. One type of content is the awful events happening in our world right now. Wars are being waged. People are starving. The climate is changing. But next to that information, what would you also find? Perhaps a cooking guide, a cat video, a meme. All of this additional noise detracts from the value of the information that you're actually receiving. We can't give everything an equal share of our mind and our time, or else we risk ruining content and creating desensitization. Social media needs to break down into smaller, much more focused digital communities that adhere to specific interests, values, or causes. This approach replicates the Unix philosophy of doing one thing and doing it well much more closely than what we have now. Platforms like Reddit have already implemented this approach, but they still merge all of the communities into one centralized feed. I believe that smaller, decentralized communities can help give certain topics the dedicated space that they need to shine. The third and final key issue that I'd like to talk about in this speech is social media's compression of communication into a one-sided exchange. And I believe this, more than anything, boils down to the media part of social media. In the 1970s, Ward Christensen and Randy Suess invented the very first form of online social media, the computerized bulletin board system. This design was revolutionary for its time, but by today's standards, it's quite dated. In the 50 years since the creation of the bulletin board, there has been little attempt to rectify its shortcomings. It literally reflects a real-life bulletin board, allowing you to leave notes and images on there. But its fatal flaw is that it doesn't allow direct human-to-human interaction, and I believe it's the primary source of division on social media. It's much easier to be rude to an image or a wall of text than it is to be rude to a real, living human being. And in the 50 years since the creation of the bulletin board, there has been little innovation in the social media space as a whole. Today, we know the bulletin board as the feed, and it is the core of every single social media platform. But this outdated design will simply not do. When Facebook announced that they were becoming this new company called Meta, and they announced all of these metaverse transitions, I thought Mark Zuckerberg had a few screws loose initially. But now, I see what he was trying to do. He was trying to change that base medium that we've had for almost 50 years now and replace it with something brand new. It's still a huge gamble though, and it might not work, but if anything, it shows evidence that we're finally progressing beyond the initial phases of social media. So, as the solution to the final key issue of this talk, I'd like to propose that we move on from the bulletin board design. It's an outdated model and we need to move on. So, in summary, a single change in mindset, a flip of a switch almost, can allow us to make social media better. Because with every single update and iteration on social media, keeping this philosophy in mind, we're going to get closer to the ideal vision of the online world. I believe that social media is a gift, perhaps one of humanity's greatest in recent years. Yet it's also a tool, one that can be used to weave society together and simultaneously tear it apart. I believe that in the future, we're going to see the rise of the technology required to facilitate these new ideas. So, in conclusion, social media's immense potential for connection is hindered by three key issues: its outdated design, its lack of specialization, and its misdirected focus on the individual. To improve, social media must shift from an individual-centric approach to a more community-centric approach. This way, we can have much more meaningful conversations and connections on the internet. And secondly, social media needs to break down into smaller, more focused communities. This way, we can combat content overload and we can fight desensitization. And thirdly, we need to start exploring new mediums that enable true two-way interaction that are better than the bulletin board system. Holding companies accountable and advocating for ethical practices is crucial. I believe that by leveraging new technologies and reshaping the idea of what social media is, we can help build a brighter online world. Together, let's build a brighter internet future.